That's the $64 million question. There's a lot of people at the USDA and in federal farm policy trying to work on rebalancing that equation. But as you mentioned, we have developed a farm policy which lets the Central Valley of California and Florida largely produce all of the vegetables for the country. That was a great thing for a long time, but now we're finding out the weaknesses of it. As fuel prices go up, we can't afford to do it. Now that we've rediscovered what local agriculture is, we realize that having to harvest those vegetables in other places early in their life cycle before they're fully ripe takes out a lot of the nutrition. They're nowhere near as tasty as having fruit that is ripened within, not an overnight flight, but within 20 minutes of where you're going to consume it. It just makes a huge difference to have the stuff locally. The concentration of our agriculture, or at least our food production in these areas, has made us vulnerable to disease of those things. If you think of some of the fruit fly epidemics we've had, it also makes us vulnerable to food security. And then with fuel supplies and the ability to move this stuff around, it makes us much more vulnerable. So people are actually looking and trying to steer Delmarva to be not, first and foremost, produce our own food, but also to be one of a growing number of food centers around the country that can decrease our reliance on the Central Valley of California and Florida for our fruits and vegetables, because we have the largest contiguous block of prime farmland that is undeveloped. We have prime soils in other areas, but they mostly are interspersed with development, like New Jersey, which is a very productive area. But they've just been developed so much. The Garden State is no longer, in the top echelons for food production because of the amount of development pressure they've had. But here's Delmarva right here, really within a 4 to 5 hour drive of about a third of the consumers in the country, or New York down to Norfolk. You really have a huge population here, and Delmarva is right in the middle of it with access to the north, to the Bay Bridge, and to the south. So it's ideally suited for food production here. And I think that's why we're having a resurgence in agricultural economics in this area. And we have, Eastern Shore Land Conservancy, we have farmers, young farmers from out of state come to us regularly, all the time, and wanting to buy land in this area because it's close to markets, because we have a real strong preservation program. We have about 30% of our prime farmland in permanent preservation now. We have a culture, we're developing a culture to transition farm to serve more, service food for people and not just feed for poultry. We have goals at Eastern Shore Land Conservancy having to do with land use and land preservation. Some of our goals are, we want to see a minimum of 80% of our new development going into our towns and not out on our farmland. That in and of itself will make a huge difference over what has happened in New Jersey and Long Island. There's another example. One of the most productive areas in the world was Long Island for truck farming. And they're down to, they only have about 14% of their land is still open. Whereas we're about the polar opposite. We're a very similar type of alluvial plain landmass, but we have about 88% of our land is still open and available. What I think is in the future for the shore is we've really turned that corner with zoning and land preservation. Most of our counties are over 60%, and Kent County is over 80% of their new growth every year is in the towns. So that's really what we want. We want it in towns, in dense ways, so that we can be efficient. People can walk to school. We can have good, healthy communities where everybody mixes together in the same activities. And we want our rural areas to remain rural so we can do agriculture and so wildlife can thrive. So I think that's the trajectory we're on the Eastern Shore. It's a rare trajectory. The obvious thing is the logistics of job centers. Most of the East Coast major metropolitan centers are on the fall lines where we have fresh water. None of those major job centers were on Delmarva. So that might be lucky, but I think it's a natural thing. And then the restricted transportation access, I think, helped us again, because we didn't get the Bay Bridge until 1954. It was a rare mindset that they thought, I'll go to the Eastern Shore and commute across the Bay Bridge, because the Bay Bridge was such a novelty when it was built. It's enormous, you know. It was neat to be able to go across there to get to the beach, but no one, or at least not early, did they think they could get across there for, you know, to commute to a job daily. Now that has changed significantly, really, in the last 15, 20 years. Beyond the geographic advantages we've had, I think one of the bigger things is just our culture. There's a lot of landowners that this land has been in their families for 200 years, are fairly common, and centennial farms are, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, but there's tons of them around that have been in the same family for 100 years. So people are very attached to their land, and you know, their heritage is in that land. So they don't give that land up. You know, there really is a white knuckle grasp on trying to hold on to that land. So I think that determination is a big part of why we've been blessed. We work in 6 counties, 6 northern counties of the shore, and we have 3 of those counties are the top 3 counties in the state in terms of rural zoning, Kent County being one of them, and then the other 3 counties are just in the next tier. For a rural area, it's almost shockingly progressive rural zoning. Just because, you know, it usually doesn't work that way. Usually to get progressive zoning, you have to have sprawl and sort of get people really upset and then get a voter block out in the rural areas that doesn't want it there anymore. But we sort of, you know, I think the Eastern Shore can really pat itself on the back about that, about being forward thinking. And Kent County led the way, really getting progressive zoning in 1984. But to get progressive zoning before you have the sprawl is unusual around the country. One of our 4 goals is for the region to have a regional transportation plan that not only facilitates better transportation for all segments of society, including people that can't afford cars, but facilitates transportation here on the shore and helps get people from the Western Shore to the beach. And you know, we have 6 counties have signed on to this goal with us, and right now we happen to be working on this, and frankly, I think it's the most exciting thing going on the Eastern Shore right now. It's quiet, hadn't been in the paper at all, but all 6 of our counties are working together and with us, and they're actually working with state government. Secretary Porcari from the State Transportation Department has been a big supporter of us trying to get this collaboration going. But basically what we're doing is trying to suss out some immediate solutions for the Chesapeake Bay crossing problems. There's safety issues, there's congestion issues. A new Bay Bridge is not the solution for these problems. We're gonna have more trucks going off the end of this thing and more 5-hour backups before we could ever get that option. So we've got everybody pulling together for some Bay Bridge options. And at the same time, people are really looking at what we need to do for the long term to plan for transportation within this region. And our Eastern Shore delegation, bless them, are trying to look into whether some rail options might work on the shore, which would be very exciting. Right now we have an award-winning busing system, but it's very small in scale. Most people haven't even heard of it. It's based in Easton, and it's called Shore Transit, or there's several names for it, but they're trying to expand it to the region. It's a door-to-door busing service, and it mostly facilitates need riders, so elderly, handicapped. It's tasked out through the Social Services Department. They have a plan now, and we're trying to implement it to scale it up so it can handle choice riders too, like you and me, the people that could drive our own car or take public transit. We've got the bones of a good transportation system sort of near term at our current scale. Long term, we don't know, but we certainly like the idea of having rail system. And in fact, one of the solutions to the Bay Bridge may even turn out to be rail.